What you're about to listen to is an excerpt from the Beans and Dice monthly RPG call-in show, where some of us guys just sit around talking about various topics in RPGs, and it's an opportunity for folks to call in and share their voice. So we just started it. May was our second episode. We're going to continue doing this. Next episode is going to be sometime in June. And in this clip, I am talking about 3 recent games that are influential to my role-playing. Hope you enjoy.
You're listening to the Beans and Dice podcast, a podcast about how we game.
Hey folks, welcome to the Beans and Dice podcast. Don't check your clocks or your calendars. It is not Thursday night. It is not live call-in show night, but we will be opening up the phone lines. It is a Friday night, and it is the first Friday in May where myself, Carlos, and
Wayne
get together to talk with our friends about RPGs. And in today's episode, we bring our special guest from Ron Talks Tabletop, my man, Ron Frazier, and from Nerdy Weds, our friend and gamer, William. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for the chat. Wayne, what's the topic for tonight?
So we're talking with Ron, we have a couple of different things. I think the last time we talked a lot of D&D, and we kind of towards the end of the show got into just the myriad of other RPG systems out there. So I think we were going to talk a little bit about like 3 of the game systems that we love that are not necessarily D&D related.
You know, and I feel like we're dealing with connoisseurs here. Like we're at like Burn's Steakhouse, and they're rolling out the dessert cart, right? And they're telling you all about the different desserts and why you want to choose one or the other. Let's let that cart roll over to Ron Frazier over here. So, Ron, tell the folks at home, what's your list of influential games for you in the RPG world that you want to share?
So I have just a couple of things to say real quick. Number 1, those were great choices, William. And number 2, I have none of those on my shelf, which just comes to show you just how many good games there are out there, old and new. So the 3 that I chose, quite frankly, have come out within the past 5 years. So the first one's a little small book. It's called Easy D6. It's a little indie RPG that is D6 based. Done by a guy called DM Scotty. He's a well-known crafter on YouTube and decided to make a system that was easy to learn and fast to play at the table. And I absolutely love this game. As a matter of fact, although the Easy D6 book is a fantasy book, the fan community has been like doing different hacks in different genres, including Star Wars. I'm actually running a Star Wars game from a Friday night group, which we're not playing tonight because obviously I'm here.
Our apologies to you, Friday night group. I'm sorry.
But it's a fantastic little game, and it's really easy to learn. You roll.
And it's E as in Echo, Z as in Zulu.
That's right. So you roll 1 or more D6s. So the rabble rouser, that's what they call the GM, sets the difficulty anywhere between 2 and 5 normally, and you roll a single die. And if you get that or higher, you succeed. If you have an advantage, you get a boon, you get an extra die, you roll 2 dice and take the higher. In a complicated situation, you get what's called a bane. You roll 2 dice and get the lower. That should be a familiar mechanic for those familiar with the 5e. Every weapon does 1 strike. You have 3 strikes of health. And 3 strikes and you're out. For the most part, you'll get like armor saves or defense saves to resist actually taking the damage and everything like that. So the heroes are more resilient than they might sound. But it's a really fun game. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds because we have other games to talk about. You guys have any questions about that game?
I'm currently looking it up online. Seeing such a small book, what's the retail on that?
It's kind of expensive because it's print on demand. You can get a drive-through RPG. And I want to say the hardcover book is somewhere around $30.
Wow.
So
download the RPG, the PDF. I'm sure they have it.
PDF is $12.
Yeah. Okay.
That's worth a PDF to put on my Kindle.
Yeah. So yeah, really check it out.
I want it just because the DM's called a rabble rouser. I've heard GMs, DMs, and all that stuff called a lot of things, but rabble rouser, that's got me.
Yeah, it's great. The players are called pushers and shovers because they're pushing and shoving against whatever the rabble rousers throwing at them. It's a neat little game. So I would highly recommend checking this game out whenever you get a chance. Maybe you get to a convention or something like that. I highly doubt a game store is going to be carrying those books, but you never know. But I know a couple of games that game stores will be carrying books of. It is my favorite fantasy setting of all time, The One Ring. This is the second edition of The One Ring. It came out a couple of years ago. I also have the special edition cover, which is which looks like basically a Red Book of West March. If you guys know what that looks like, it's a red book. And so you're playing the various races of Middle Earth. This is set somewhere between the end of The Hobbit and the beginning of the Lord of the Rings in the timeline. Because one of the things that people have issues with playing in an IP world is like, well, what do I do? We already have Gandalf and Aragorn and Elrond and all those folks. Well, the thing is that there's this 60 to 70 year gap between the wars, between the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings, where there's some historical details sketched out, but there's a lot of space to play, and so that's where you play. You might play in the Wilderland, Mirkwood or what have you. The second edition of the game is set in Eriador. That's the lands west of the Misty Mountains, where Rivendell and the Shire and all those other places are. And honestly, there's lots of points of light is what the setting can be best described as. You got your settlement here or there, but there's not these super large cities or what have you, like Minas Tirith, right? Minas Tirith is the big city. Edoras down in Rohan is kind of big. And so there's plenty of space for you to play and be heroes, and the system has its own. It has a special D12 called a feat die that has a Gandalf symbol and a Eye of Sauron symbol and the numbers 1 through 10. So you always roll that, and then you roll a number of 6-sided dice equal to your skill. Always looking for a certain test number, and that's the main main mechanic for that game. There's rules for hope. You spend hope to add to your roll or what have you. There's rules for that represent the effect of the shadow on you, and if you get to a certain level of shadow, you might have a bout of madness, or you might even succumb to the shadow and become an NPC. So the themes of Tolkien are very well represented in the One Ring.
Cool. And that's the one that I recall you had built a ring system for range in combat. Is that the one I'm thinking of?
Yes.
You had this beautifully crafted 3D piece of terrain, which had a center ring, a middle ring, and a long ring, and you were using that for players to establish positioning almost in the game. So mid range or long range.
Right. And so I have a video of that on my YouTube channel, and that's not part of the One Ring actually. So in combat, you have, instead of absolute spatial positioning, you have combat stances. You're either forward, which is aggressive, open, or defensive, which is obviously defensive, or you're in rearward stance, which is ranged combat. And so, but otherwise, the combat is pretty much theater of the mind in the One Ring. But we like using miniatures, and I like using minis too. But instead of doing the gridded combat, this was a way to do abstract combat, where it's if you were in forward stance, you were in one circle, and open, you were the next ring, whatever. And then I just kind of put the enemies next to you that you're engaged with. And so, like, as that changed, instead of saying moving heroes from here to here, you can kind of move the monsters, might move the enemies around, or you might move the characters around, based on the different stances that they were in. It worked out pretty well. You still move things around, and you don't count squares. So, like, it was the best of both.
It wasn't tactical.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good call out. War of the Ring. That was your second call out.
Yeah. So the third book, it just came out earlier this year, backed by Kickstarter. And I mentioned, pardon the shaking camera, I mentioned in the Discord earlier today that I didn't have a physical copy of the book. But guess what arrived like 2 hours before the live stream? This is Everyday Heroes.
Okay.
Nice.
This game.
It looks very familiar to.
It does look very familiar.
Yeah. So this is a special edition of the book. This is a spiritual successor of D20 Modern. But it's 5e mechanics.
Nice.
The design team comprised of folks that actually worked on D20 Modern.
Okay. So
you have the same sensibilities. But with 5e mechanics instead of 3rd edition D&D mechanics, it only goes up to level 10, which I'm totally fine with. I don't
imagine year-long campaigns, going on in that setting.
Right. So you have 6 classes based on your attribute, and then you have subclasses, within those 6 classes.
So they kind of kept the fast, strong, smart.
Yeah. They kept that exactly. I just played a couple of sessions of it. I'm very familiar with 5e. I've been playing 5e D&D since its inception. So the rules were very familiar to me. They added some nice tweaks for chases and vehicle combats and all that kind of stuff. But these folks are also doing a series of what's called cinematic adventures, which are books that are based on different IPs. They have new rules in each book as well as an adventure. They're doing stuff like Pacific Rim, the MonsterVerse, King Kong and whatnot, The Crow, Universal Soldier, Escape from New York, all kinds of stuff. So it's a fantastic game.
Who publishes this?
It's called Evil Genius Productions.
Okay.
It's going on my wish list for Father's Day, Christmas. I don't know. It's going on one of them.
Yeah. So Carlos, you just gotten back in playing 5e D&D. Like the rules will feel very familiar to you, and the feel, the theme of the game will feel very familiar to you. Give it a chance.
I like that it's a 5e version of that. I thoroughly enjoyed the modern role-playing system because it opened a whole new ball of wax. You didn't have to learn a new system. You get to bring D&D in, and you got guns and rifles and superpowers.
That was that. Well, I'll do my second game first as we get into mine because it kind of goes into that a little bit. Yeah. So that's good. Yeah, I gotta look to get that.
Yeah. So those are my 3 games.
Awesome.